I know crypto has had a tough 2026 so far, but if you know where to look, there are some really exciting things happening. There are some amazing developments.
We gave agents wallets, but they don't really have anything to pay for. So we created X42 in response to this.
That is going to fundamentally turn the whole economic model kind of 180. There are now more X402 transactions happening in, a few hours than there were happening in like days, just a few months ago. It really is up and to the right.
In the future, you primarily are interacting through Coinbase, through your ChatGPT instance or your Claude instance or whatever your agent chooses to interact with.
Could an AI agent do this? Could an autonomous AI agent go rogue? Do you guys see Coinbase as ultimately becoming financial operating system, like a Federal Reserve for AI? Or
it's a great question.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Now, I know crypto has had a tough 2026 so far, but if you know where to look, there are some really exciting things happening. There are some amazing developments going on out there in the cryptoverse. And one of those, which I've been particularly interested in, is everything that's been going on with AI agents and X402 and agentic payments, etc. And I'm very pleased to have today in the studio with me one of the very best people, if not the best person to talk to about all of this. It is Lincoln Murr, head of AI products at Coinbase. Lincoln, thanks for joining me again.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me.
Now, eagle-eyed viewers may spot that Lincoln and I have actually spoken before. We had a great conversation. I think it was about 2 years ago now. It seems like only yesterday, but I remember it well because we spent a lot of time talking about AI agents. You were telling me about some of the amazing things that you guys were working on over there at Coinbase. And it seems like this is a really good time to sort of pick up that conversation because it seems like we have now evolved to the next stage. Not only do we have these autonomous agents executing any number of tasks online and becoming kind of more advanced by the day, but now, crucially, they're also able to make payments via the X402 protocol, which, Lincoln, you have been a key figure in developing. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe for people who aren't so aware of what X402 is and what it makes possible, can you just give us the kind of elevator pitch for it?
Gladly. Yeah. So last time we spoke, I was working on AgentKit, which was an early tool to give AI agents access to crypto wallets. And we were primarily seeing them being used for things like creating tokens, trading different assets on decentralized exchanges, and interacting with DeFi, which was all great, but it's very obviously siloed to this crypto bubble. And what we realized is that we gave agents wallets, but they don't really have anything to pay for. So we created X402 in response to this. And the motivation for creating it was primarily because this has been something that the internet has been building toward for the past several decades. We originally, in the internet spec that was created in the early 90s, had these things called status codes. You may be familiar with some of them, like 404 means that you can't find the website, or 200 means success. There was one that was actually left with a description that says reserved for future use. And if you can guess, that was 402, payment required. Mark Andreessen actually called it the original sin of the internet, that we never created a way for native payments to exist on the internet. And we thought that now is the right time for us to bring that back with X402, now that we have the convergence of both stablecoins as a way for anyone to send value anywhere in the world for sub-second, sub-cent transactions, and AI agents who actually need a standard machine native way to send money across the internet to other AI agents and to pay for services and to ultimately become economically independent financial actors across the internet.
Was there a kind of light bulb moment for you guys where it was like, hang on a sec, this protocol's been sitting here unused for like 30 years. That must have been quite a cool moment.
Yeah, I remember it quite vividly. We were sitting at the Ethereum Foundation's DevCon event in Bangkok, Thailand. The team was sitting in the lobby of our hotel talking about where we thought agents would be going. And somebody brought up that this 402 standard had existed, and there had been previous attempts at an implementation. Balaji, who was one of Coinbase's earlier CTOs, actually had his previous company, Earn.com, working on one of these implementations. And you've seen over the history of the internet, companies like PayPal and Stripe and other internet native payment providers also taking an attempt at solving this problem. But we thought now was the right time for this to all try one more time and see what happens. And fortunately, this is the one that really took off.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because, micropayments and what have you have been talked about for a long time. They've always kind of been a thing. And I remember in the sort of earlier days of crypto, they came up again as a way, of incentivizing creators or things like that. I mean, the Brave browser, for instance, was kind of built along that and being able to reward people for browsing with BAT tokens and whatever. And so that seemed to be one of the things that was being explored in crypto's early days. And then it kind of fell by the wayside for a few years. But it's really exciting now to see that resurrected. And it kind of feels like this is, as you say, as Mark Andreessen said, the original sin of the internet. It seems like a kind of missing piece of the puzzle has finally kind of fallen into place.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you bring up Brave as well, because just the other day they announced that they're going to start accepting X42 payments for their Brave AI browser. So really funny to see everything sort of come to a head. And on your point about this microtransactions previously being a thing and never actually reaching the full potential, I think a large part of that was this crypto UX problem that we've constantly had since the beginning of crypto, and the need to have a wallet and manually approve transactions and all of this friction that gets in the way of people actually using it. But now when you can just hand that complexity to an agent for them to handle and deal with your microtransactions for you, it becomes much more appealing to the average user to just give their agent money and let it go off and run on their behalf.
Yeah. And I guess, obviously in the earlier days of crypto as well, sort of fees were notoriously high, weren't they? Back in 2017 and 2021, transacting on Ethereum was ludicrously expensive, wasn't it? And now we're in the era of Base, which is obviously kind of, I guess, if you like, the spiritual home for X402, although it is now on other chains like Solana, and I'm sure it's going to expand even further. But yeah, it feels like quite a few steps had to be got towards, and maybe the last one was at X402 itself. But I guess you needed those blockchains that could be super, super fast, but also super, super cheap, because a micropayment isn't really going to work if the transaction fee is as much or maybe more than the payment itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. When X42 was initially reaching a lot of traction in around September or October of 2025, it was actually resulting in the gas prices of Base spiking. So we still have work to do to make it even faster and cheaper. But yeah, the coincidence of agents and stablecoins and very cheap, fast, scalable blockchains all coming together at the same time is a large reason that we saw such initial great traction with X402.
Yeah. And that, I guess, must kind of present a fairly unique challenge, or a fairly big challenge, in that, if X402 continues to be successful, and I remember you posted something on Twitter just a few days ago, like, there are now more X402 transactions happening in, a few hours than there were happening in like days, just a few months ago. It's crazy, it really is up and to the right, that curve. But I guess, if that continues, then we're talking about a massive multiplier of the number of transactions that these blockchains are going to have to deal with. And obviously that's amazing, because that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants blockchains to transactions to go up. But of course, scaling that is going to be a challenge if it's even, I guess, half as successful as many people think it will be.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that the agent transactions and the velocity and the momentum that they're going to bring will be one of the biggest factors that leads to future needs for scalability of chains. It feels like we've reached the sufficient point for these chains and their infrastructure to be tested for trading and speculation and this crypto-oriented audience. But breaking out into the mainstream internet is going to really require us to rethink how we're building chains and architecting them. I could see more payment chains, L3s, various different ways of thinking about scalability starting to become a absolutely critical component of this next era of the internet, being this agentic internet that we're moving toward.
Yeah, and can we dig into that a bit, because I love this idea of sort of looking into the crystal ball a bit, and let's think about a random Tuesday, say in 2030. You've got an autonomous AI agent with its own integrated wallet. It kind of wakes up and starts going about its day. Although I guess you could argue that these things are sort of going to be always on 24/7, 365. But to put it into the context of a working day, what do you think like a typical sort of day in the life of one of these agents would look like under the hood? I mean, what do you anticipate being its biggest sort of bills or expenses as it goes about kind of doing its work?
That's a very fun thought experiment. The sort of immediate thing that comes to mind is these agents. I think we're in an interesting era where they're being subsidized by humans to solve tasks on their behalf. And that's great. Users are paying for cloud subscriptions, giving agents these tokens, and the agents are running off and solving problems. But in a world where agents have access to their own money, they can finally become financially independent actors. And you can imagine that in some sense, it feels like the resurgence of DAOs, where you have this truly autonomous organization that is operated by autonomy at the core and only needing humans at the edges. So beyond the typical things you might think of around like compute and hosting and those costs that are analogous to food and drink for humans and basic utilities, I imagine that we'll see agents paying accountants to spin up LLCs or lawyers maybe to do these tasks that an agent couldn't necessarily do themselves. And anytime an agent wants to interact with a specific service behind, say, a paywalled site or a piece of content that they may not have access to, I think we're going to see agents start to pay for those as we shift from this attention-based attribution economy on the internet toward one that's significantly geared more toward utility. With agents that don't have a concept of attention in the traditional sense, it doesn't make sense to necessarily show them ads. Microtransactions are the cleanest rail on which we can start to think about agents interacting across the internet. I guess it will be somehow job task dependent on exactly what an agent is spending per day, but I imagine it'll be broken down into the paying other agents or premium services for this content as they're engaging with it and interacting with it on the fly.
Yeah, and I guess the more you sort of think about that, the more you think, wow, this has sort of got the potential to I guess rewire the real economics of the internet, because at the moment, I suppose we are, as you say, we are on an attention-based model. Advertising revenue is a huge thing for many sites, but yeah, I mean, agents aren't going to read ads, as you say. So yeah, I mean, that is going to fundamentally turn the whole economic model kind of 180.
Yeah, I fully agree. It'll be very interesting because I think we'll start to see this premium data, and we're actually already just starting to see early signs of this. Premium data today, the way that's primarily being ingested for agents by X42 is for trading. So we see agents that have access to a crypto wallet and are running some sort of strategy, either one that they've created or in most cases has been created by their owner or user that says something like, find the latest news every single day and make a stock pick based off of it. And these agents go off to various different websites, different blogs, different pieces of available content and financial data, and use that to make more informed trading decisions. And Vitalik actually has a very interesting early article about this topic that he wrote, where he hypothesizes that AI agents will be the primary traders on low liquidity prediction markets because the cost for them to analyze data and go through the process of reasoning is so much lower that it actually doesn't make sense for us to be trading on sub $10,000 prediction markets, but agents can make a lot of money doing that. And people's unique, valuable data that they might have is going to be one of the critical pieces that allows an agent to have an edge in some sense in how they think about markets.
And I guess, I mean, that must feed into why you guys, because I remember it's been about a month now, I think, since you announced Coinbase for agents, which is obviously a huge kind of push from you guys to cater for that agentic economy. So can you talk a little bit about that? How is that going to work? And how will that affect, like a regular, everyday, I was going to say crypto user, but I'm kind of thinking like internet user really, because it looks like that line is going to be blurred. But yeah, can you tell us a bit about how Coinbase for agents is going to work?
Yeah, so broadly our strategy with how we think about AI agents accessing the platform is twofold. And we've seen this play out in various other chat interfaces and apps as well. You want to have a story for how users can interact with agents inside the Coinbase app, which we have with Coinbase Advisor. It's a more simple interface. It provides you with regulated, trusted advice directly inside Coinbase. But Coinbase for Agents is more of a plugin such that you can give your agent access to the entirety of what Coinbase offers in a seamless and frictionless interface. So we really want Coinbase to become the backbone of the post-AGI economy. And part of that is having the primary financial account for AI agents live on Coinbase and payments to run through Coinbase's infrastructure. So practically what we think this looks like is that users will set up an agent or hire an agent or something of the sort, and they'll log in with their Coinbase account and give their agent access to an isolated portfolio in which the agent can manage their own money, in which they can pay for access to other services, or maybe even list a service themselves that could be paid for by other agents directly into the Coinbase account. All of this is kind of how we're thinking about this future direction of agentic wallets and interactions, and how we can make it as easy as possible for anyone to get started using this technology, even if you're not necessarily familiar with Claude Code or Codex today. We think this is the way that the world is going to shift. It'll only become easier over time. So we need to make it as easy as possible to plug in Coinbase there as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? As when I was reading about it, and as you were talking about it just now, I remembered that, so many, obviously all exchanges, Coinbase and even TradFi exchanges like Robinhood, which are obviously leaning into the agentic side of things as well, they're always chasing new markets, aren't they? It's always about expansion, and for however many years it's been about breaking into new territories, new geographies, or new demographics or whatever. But really, it seems like the real growth is to be had in non-human users. Human users are so last cycle now.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we saw in the 2010s, the story was around the shift from web to mobile interfaces. And actually, when Facebook first went public, they had a lot of serious questions from their investors about what their mobile story was and how you capture this new audience that's primarily interacting on their phones. And their response was to go buy Instagram and WhatsApp. And now in the 2020s, we're seeing a similar story, but significantly more important, which is the shift from mobile to agents. And the reason I think this is even more critical than the shift from web to mobile is that agents aren't necessarily just a new form factor by which people are interacting, but it's a fully autonomous cycle that happens even without the user manually tapping these buttons. So you can imagine the billions of people that have cell phones, they might have 10 agents each. And now you have a substantially larger set of users, and the velocity of transactions is increasing, and it's going to stress test a lot of the infrastructure that exists today. And the companies and platforms, both in terms of the crypto space and exchanges, but also just general services, are going to be stress tested by the amount of velocity and momentum coming through their products as everything starts to move at internet scale, agent native scale.
Yeah, because I guess, if you're researching something, let's say you're putting together a research report or a post or something like that, you might visit a handful of websites. You might visit 10, maybe 20 websites, depending on how deep you're going. You'll go and look at a lot of data. But of course, if you outsource a task like that, or any other task to an agent, or even to an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, they're going out and they're visiting and scraping many, many more sites. So the volume of traffic, as you say, is expanding kind of exponentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting piece about that too is we've seen early hints of companies and websites interested in starting to gate their websites for agents. We're in what I've been thinking about as the LimeWire Napster era of the agentic internet currently, where all of these companies are scraping this data without the express consent of the actual data providers. So we need some type of solution to exist to enable websites to trivially allow their content to not only be accessible to agents, but to actually engage in a commercial agreement between an agent and a website that's providing this content.
And of course, we've already seen that. I mean, Cloudflare just the other day announced that they were the monetization gateway. I think AWS is kind of pursuing similar things as well. So we're it feels like we're on the cusp of some really big developments there. Can I ask you a more sort of technical question regarding that? Because we're seeing this interesting landscape form with, obviously we talked about X402, but there's also, OpenAI and Stripe have been developing ACP. I think Google's got AP2. So, there's not quite one standard out there yet. So, I mean, you may be biased because you're working on X402, but I mean, do you see this playing out as a kind of winner-take-all scenario? Or are we maybe heading towards some kind of multi-protocol web where agents are going to need, some sort of universal translator or something to pay for these services across all these different platforms, like you were talking about there?
It's a fascinating question that has some roots in how the internet has evolved over time, and as we've seen standards evolve generally online. My view is that we'll have probably one primary standard specifically for payments. And to get the X402 bias out of the way, the reason that I think it is in a very strong position to capture this market is because it's very simple and it's rooted in the standards that already exist in terms of HTTP and what we've built decades of internet infrastructure around. Now, that being said, I do think there's a lot of room for these other standards to exist. AP2, for example, I think of it more as like a business card for your agent in the sense that you can define more than just how it can pay for a specific endpoint or piece of service on the internet, but how do you actually pay this agent yourself? What different payment options does it accept? Maybe X402 is the standard on which you build this, but you can have various different implementations here as well, which is where I also think it gets somewhat nuanced. Like, for example, back in the early days of other standards wars, for example, Betamax versus VHS, it's actually in the best interest of all infrastructure companies and providers to align around a single standard such that they can reach the broadest distribution. But everyone can build their own VHS tapes or the machines that read those actual boxes such that there's still value to be captured. So the way that we think about it is somewhat similar to how Google acquired the Android operating system. And instead of taking Apple's approach of closing it down and only making it available in Google Pixel phones, it is now the operating system, because it is so open, that powers 80% of devices, from Kindles to smart cars to a plethora of different phones. And I think there's the same sort of set of incentives that align with the agentic payment space. Now we're going to see payments across the internet shape up, where maybe there's one standard that everyone agrees upon. I hope that's X402, but it could be anything. And all of these different infrastructure providers will have their own rails on which they're enabling their little piece of the pie to be captured in this broad agentic economy.
It's a fascinating just space, isn't it? As you say, I think the VHS and Betamax one is a good comparison, because you're sort of, there's so much to play for, isn't there? This is such a huge leap forward. It feels like, given everything that we've been talking about, that this is something that everyone is going to want to get in on and get right and get their standard at the heart of it all.
Yeah, fully. It's. I think too, one of the common misconceptions around X402 is that it is purely a crypto standard. And while it does have crypto at its heart, anyone can come and propose a scheme for how they want X402 to be used or on what network that might be. That's why we have Visa and Mastercard and Stripe, all as members of the X402 Foundation. Now, fundamentally, Coinbase believes that the cheapest, fastest, most efficient rails for payments to settle on are stablecoins, and that's ultimately where everything will trend. But in the meantime, there's obviously a huge value to accepting card payments and opening up agentic payments to happen for users who may not have easy access to crypto or these tools that we assume will exist in the future. So all of this is around the standards alignment and how we can get everyone agreeing on how to send internet native transactions. But maybe still there's a lot of work to do about finding what the ultimate rail is. Kind of like how there's various different postal services that can all deliver to the same zip codes and addresses and whatnot.
Yeah, and I guess they can coexist to an extent, as you've been saying. It's how they all kind of fit together and operate. But the standard is there. And I remember thinking when looking at the X402 Foundation and when that was announced, I was like, wow, because obviously you guys were the big lead on that. Although you've since open sourced that tech, but it was a huge battery of names behind that. As you said, stablecoin, Visa, Mastercard, people like that. All the kind of big names in payments are behind this, which was, as you say, it's kind of easy to forget that it's not just crypto. Although, as I guess crypto people, we hope that it trends that way and trends towards stablecoins.
I've been extremely surprised by the amount of adoption and interest and legitimacy that has been brought to X402 and crypto generally by these names that are both associated with the foundations as well as those that haven't been publicly announced or are still interested in joining. After following the crypto space for almost a decade now, it's really the moment where I've seen the most just interest and excitement from these traditional Web2 companies. It feels like we're finally at the point where people understand the value props of crypto. They understand how agents are going to potentially take over the way that we think about the internet. And having a story for both of those, both to present to their bosses who are breathing down their necks trying to figure out what exactly they should do around crypto and AI, but also for the genuine benefits that it provides, has been very gratifying in that regard. And I think it will only continue over time as we see these use cases get more and more fleshed out.
Yeah, and it feels like crypto now is really embedding itself in the whole sort of structure of global payments, doesn't it? Because a lot of people ask me now, people who maybe have tuned out a bit from crypto, they say, where is crypto now? What's it doing and what have you? And the answer I keep giving them is that it's become financial infrastructure. And in a way that's, that can be a bit disheartening for people in a way, because those old times of alt season and all these kind of weird and wonderful altcoin projects popping off and going crazy is kind of very much behind us. And it's like we've kind of arrived at the destination that we were always headed in. And I don't know, I think to some people it feels a bit anticlimactic, but actually it's really exciting, isn't it? Because now crypto is embedded, and we see new announcements around stablecoins every day. So many companies and even countries are exploring them, whereas before they wouldn't have gone near them. It feels like we've ticked over into this new era of crypto, really.
Yeah, it's interesting to see all of this technology be the invisible backbone on which the entirety of our global financial infrastructure is settling. It's unfortunate that we didn't see that reflected in the prices of these assets, but I still think there's, in some sense, infrastructure and room to grow, as now we have regulatory clarity that allows companies to feel comfortable building on public blockchains. So I imagine from here, it feels in some sense that we've hit a tipping point. And the entrenchment that Ethereum and Bitcoin and some of these other crypto infrastructure solutions it isn't going anywhere. If anything, it will only accelerate. And the door has been cracked open for that to actually happen at scale, like people have been talking about for the past several years, but finally here.
And I feel as well, I remember making a prediction a while ago that I always thought that in the future, everyone will use crypto, but most people won't have any idea that they're doing it. Because so much of the complexity that was back then and still exists today, but that keeps being abstracted away, doesn't it? It keeps getting easier and easier, more and more seamless. And I kind of feel that prediction, but unlike many of my predictions, might actually come true. I think we are on the stage where more and more people are going to use crypto, but just not be aware of it.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think you nailed that one. I imagine that given that PayPal has PYUSD as a stablecoin, it's only a matter of time until that becomes the underpinnings of Venmo and eBay and all of the different platforms on which you can accept PayPal transactions. And I think the same is true for Stripe and all of the work that they're doing acquiring Bridge and Privy, and then also the work that Coinbase is doing to make payments more accessible as well. It all feels like it's coming to a place that is been a long journey. One that still, in some sense, feels like it's just getting started, but it almost feels disingenuous to discount the credit and the work that's gone over the past several years to make all of what is possible today not possible.
Yeah, and so much of it has been sort of just hard work, hard kind of unglamorous work in the background, I guess. Trying to figure out a way to make the UX more clearer and may abstract things away, and it's such vital work, and I think it's finally starting to bear fruit. But I feel that whilst we're talking about agents and, agents being able to make purchases and getting more and more autonomous, I feel we have to kind of talk a little bit about the safety side of it, because I guess, and this is a question I'm sure you'll have fielded many, many times, so apologies. But, I guess in our world, in the human world, the nightmare, if you like, is a toddler getting hold of an iPad and racking up, $10,000 in in-app purchases or whatever. But I guess, the question that many people are going to ask is that, could an AI agent do this? Could an autonomous AI agent go rogue and, just either sort of rack up a massive amounts of spending or go, start doing things that no one really wants it to do. So, can I ask, you guys working on X402 and whatever, is there, how do you make sure that an agent isn't able to do that, go on some kind of spending spree or kind of I guess, jump the guardrails, for want of a better term?
It's a great question, and it's one that pretty much every skeptic about AI, or even generally giving AI access to money, has to ask at some point. And fortunately, the answer is quite simple. And in the same way that we've seen the adoption of self-driving cars go through very discrete stages, where at first you need to have a human with their hands on the wheel and it only works for parking. Then you can have a human who can drive it on the freeway, take their hands off the wheel, but if it does anything, it needs a human's control. All the way now to where if I'm in San Francisco, I can ride in a car that doesn't have a driver in the front seat. It's been an incredible gradual increase in the capabilities of these technology, but also in society's trust of this technology as well. And we're seeing the same exact thing happen with agents, where some people are most comfortable first being in the loop for every single interaction that they make with an agent, which is exactly what happened with early instances of ChatGPT as well. Previously, you would ask a single question and ChatGPT would come back to you. But now in the era of Claude Code and these longer running agents, you may set up something that runs for hours on end. And even if you don't think about it this way, that agent is in some sense spending money without your direct discretion or authority over that, in the sense that it's using the tokens and API credits that you give it to go pay OpenAI and Claude. So in some sense, the sort of increasing trust in agents has been happening this entire time and will continue to happen. And for the payments piece specifically, we certainly have lots of guardrails in place that are available on Coinbase for agents. For example, you can set the maximum transaction size. You can set it such that you get a push notification to manually approve a transaction if it goes over a specific dollar amount that your agent is paying for. And also, too, I think one of the nice things about working with microtransactions specifically that are in some cases lower than 1 cent, typically in the 1 to 10 cent range, is that even if your agent makes a mistake and messes up, it only lost a very small fraction of value. It learns from that experience. It leaves a review on that experience such that nobody in the future has to go through that again. And then it's only smarter going forward. And we're right in the middle of this very interesting time of self-improvement loops and agents being able to become more accurate and efficient with what they're doing. And we've seen that become very true in the payment space as well, to where for as much concern as there is around this AI going rogue and spending a lot of money, I haven't seen any examples of that happening at all since the latest sort of round of technology has come out.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people, when I've had this question as well when I've been talking about X402 to people, and a few people have said, well, what if it goes and spends, hundreds of thousands of dollars and stuff? And my first answer to them is always like, well, don't give it access to a wallet with hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's probably a good place to start. But yeah, obviously people are going to be kind of nervous about technology like this, and again, self-driving cars, I think, is a good analogy to make, because it's one of these things that we know that once the technology is there and working as it should, it's going to be amazing. Like I truly believe that I've got young nieces and nephews at the moment, and I really believe that by the time they're old enough to learn to drive, I think they're going to be like, I can't believe people used to drive cars. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be so embedded. It's just going to seem weird. And, it's going to be for us like when people used a horse and cart. But, that kind of technology, it's always, it does feel like a big sort of fear factor to break through. And I guess as someone actually developing that must be something you get asked about a lot. And of course, have to spend time on.
Yeah. It's a very important problem to solve, and one that fortunately is fairly straightforward to solve. If there's one thing crypto is great at, it's building infrastructure. And a lot of the infrastructure for spending limits and payment policies and whatnot, a lot of which was inspired by the previous generation of hacks and DeFi controls that needed to be in place. That is all in some sense reusable for this new agent era.
We in crypto have learned lessons the hard way. So I guess it's like,
very much so.
Anyone from outside is like, well, what can go wrong? It's like, trust me, we've seen it. We all build for it. I just want to ask you a couple more things if you've got time as well. So, I mean, we kind of, if we are on fast forward to a world where 99% of internet traffic and even economic transactions are going to be machine to machine, then what does something like Coinbase look like in that world? How do you guys see Coinbase as ultimately becoming, kind of like some primary financial operating system, like a Federal Reserve for AI, or this? I'm just wondering how you guys are sort of envisaging that future.
Yeah, we've done a handful of thought exercises about what Coinbase looks like after we see AGI. And I don't think it would necessarily be Federal Reserve in the sense that we are the core decider of monetary policy for these AI agents. But I think more so the idea that if any sort of transaction on the internet via agents is happening, it is in some way, shape, or form touching Coinbase infrastructure. I think Coinbase to this point has done a fantastic job of building out this consumer brand and also having a reputation of trust and authority and legitimacy and regulatory compliance. And I think that is going to be the moat through which this next generation of agentic infrastructure is also built, such that people feel comfortable delegating their money to Coinbase and to these agents to spend on their behalf. I can imagine a world where in the future, you primarily are interacting through Coinbase through your ChatGPT instance or your Claude instance or whatever your agent chooses to interact with. And that's largely what we're building for right now, is seeing that shift in the 2020s of mobile to agent and how exactly we can go about enabling Coinbase to be accessible to agents. And a large part of that is making it exposed via APIs and building the infrastructure that we think is required to allow agents to both trade, pay, manage user money, and ultimately become a fully autonomous entity that can just exist on the internet like a proto-digital life form of sorts. And we want to be the account for those agents.
It's amazing, isn't it? What a journey that is from being a place to buy Bitcoin to being like this completely different entity. I mean, I wonder if Brian Armstrong ever kind of envisaged anything like that when he was setting it up with Y Combinator or whatever.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch the entire space evolve, both in terms of how people think about crypto, how people are using it, and ultimately how agents are going to be using it going forward.
Now, just one last thing I want to answer. This is the question I ask myself all the time, and I think we may have touched on this in our last chat a couple of years ago. But I'd be interested to just hear what your take on it is. I wonder, I kind of see it going two ways at the moment. Do we move to a more agentic economy, and more of the tasks that we do online and, in our work, more and more is kind of outsourced to agents that can do it more efficiently, that now have the ability to pay for all these things, et cetera, et cetera. Does that mean that do you think we end up spending more time online and we're just like 10 times more efficient? Or do you think it kind of goes the other way and it's sort of one of these things where actually people spend less time online and more time doing, whatever else, because agents are just handling so much of the, I don't want to call it grunt work, but, so much of the work that can be easily outsourced to them? I mean, do you, or is there a middle way that I'm not thinking of, perhaps?
It's a great question. I think the way that we'll start to see this shape up is really the fundamental question to ask is how much more productive will the ultimate version of AI make you? And maybe the answer is 50%. Maybe it's 1,000%. Maybe it's so high that you're not even needed as a entity to be programming this anymore. I have to imagine that it's somewhere between the 200 to 500% and the 10,000%. But I think we'll always have a need for humans to ideate and spend their brain power figuring out what to tell these agents to do or what to have them focus on. I think one clear example of why this might be the case is we're increasingly trending toward a world where software is being commoditized. It's so easy to spin up any sort of piece of code or program or app today that things that previously would have been $100 million companies in the early 2010s can now be built overnight with just a human talking in their room into a microphone for 5 minutes and coming back with a fully fleshed out idea. And I think that moat of human ingenuity is going to be what ultimately remains. And whether that manifests itself as humans providing insights and expertise and sort of like a taste to AI, ultimately, I think that could be the case. And if that is so, I imagine that we will have more time to focus on other things that are generally more creative or enjoyable about our work. I've spent a lot of time automating all of my least favorite parts about working. I never submit an expense report anymore. It's all done by my agent. I even have it like write messages to teams or people out of the loop just to get them up to date and use it all for context management tools and whatnot. And I imagine this will only continue and accelerate. But the one area that I have not been able to automate at all is my personal life and the things that I want to do outside of work, because all of that is centered around enjoyment and fulfillment and the things that don't necessarily have productivity as a baseline metric. So in that regard, I have to imagine that people's personal lives will continue to be fulfilling and interesting and exciting, even as their work lives get hyper optimized, such that we find some sort of virtuous cycle where there's a great equilibrium between the two.
Yeah, and perhaps even more so. And hey, is anyone out there going to be sorry to see the back of having to submit expenses reports? I doubt it.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, man. Well, Lincoln, this has been great. I won't take up any more of your time because I know how busy you are, but I really appreciate this. And yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing to think that, 2 years ago, we had that fascinating discussion where you were telling me so much about AI agents. 2 years down the line, we're talking today and so much has happened. I feel we should schedule in one for summer 2028 where, it'll be just mind-blowing how much has been achieved then. But I look forward to that. But Lincoln, I really appreciate it today. Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. It's great. It's like I said last time, you were one of the original channels that got me interested and excited about the crypto space. I would love to do this again in 2028. It's been surreal to see everything evolve over the past 2 years, and I'm sure it'll only accelerate.
Thanks, Lincoln. I appreciate it. We will leave links to your Twitter and other resources below. I should also give a shout out. Lincoln is the creator of the TLDR newsletter as well. He's a very busy man, but TLDR is fantastic. It's a really good roundup, a daily roundup of the stories that are happening in crypto. And you guys have a real knack for kind of finding the smaller, more niche stories that are actually way more interesting than what's going on with strategy or the Clarity Act or anything like that. So yeah, congratulations on that and keep up the good work. I'll leave a link to TLDR below as well, because it is one of the best crypto resources out there.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back again soon. My thanks again to Lincoln, and check out X402. It is up only from here. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.